We are live. It is November 2nd. It's November already. Can you believe it? Orange and blue today. Cecil Lammey here. Hope to be joined by Andrew Mason in just a little bit. But we got to talk about what's going on with the Denver Broncos. They're on a bye, but that doesn't mean there's not news and information floating around about what this team did do at the trade deadline and how they went about their business in terms of adding a Chase Edmonds, getting rid of a Bradley Chubb. We'll go over all of it and then some as we talk about the Denver Broncos and George Paton's comments. Yesterday, we had an abbreviated show. Today will be somewhat abbreviated as well. But we had George Paton press conference where he revealed something that caught fire. I think you even saw it on a lot of the, headline services and places that promote, the widgets with the news and information on websites you go to about George Paton, dropping information about the Broncos that surprises. And I'm like, well, I don't think it's really that much of a surprise, but it certainly did get the attention of people when they said, and George Paton said that if they were 5-3, he would have traded Bradley Chubb instead of being 3-5. And it caused people to shake their fists at the heavens. And even our very own Derek Wolf on the drive was like, nah, I don't believe it. I don't think he would have traded him if they were, on a run or whatever. And okay, yeah, that's an interesting conversation, but George Paton said it. I tend to believe him. I'm not going to say that he was lying about that, but I thought it was an interesting conversation. I thought our guy, Zach Stevens, did a really good job, Mace, of asking that question and getting that answer from George Paton yesterday. And as I alerted the viewing audience, Mace, so a little abbreviated today will be just like yesterday. And for preparation for George Paton, the whole I would have traded him if we were 5-3 is kind of the headline of that press conference.
Yeah, and look, I mean, I get what he's saying, and I think, I think when you're viewing it logically, yeah, he'd be like, yeah, I couldn't turn it down, but emotion does come into play. If you're 7-1, I mean, I can't see the Broncos saying yes to the same trade if they're 7-1. I really can't. I think that the other thing is also, with any of these potential trades here, that's one, even though he has full say over football operations, if you were 7-1 and you got that offer, you're probably having a conversation with Greg Penner about, okay, it is ultimately your show. What's the course of action here? And I don't get the sense that Greg Penner would have said, yes, trade Bradley Chubb if you're 7-1, regardless of what you're getting. It's more likely they're trying to find ways to be buyers at that point.
Right. Yeah. And that's what I was going to say. It's like it flips the script as to what you are.
Yeah.
And DenverFan.com, where you go for all your information. And okay, next year, will they be buyers instead of sellers in your eyes?
If they're sellers again, George Paton's job is on the line. I think, and even though he's done good work with the draft, and I've written about that, I've talked about that. You've talked about what he's done in the draft as well. But if you are sellers again, sellers for Paton's third consecutive year, and then 5 of 6, and it would have been 6 of 6. The only reason they weren't sellers in 2020 was because you had to go through the hoops of COVID testing and isolation and all that. So the in-season trade market in 2020 was depressed because of the environment in which that season took place. If it were not for that, the Broncos, I think they were 3-4 at the trade deadline in 2020 because they had the early bye. I think we'd be talking about 6 of 6 years in which they were sellers.
Right.
And that's the thing. Inevitably, if you're a seller year in and year out, it's reflective of where you are as a franchise and the fact that you're coming in with less than expected results. So yeah, and that was kind of the point I made in my column at DenverFan.com, that if the Broncos are sellers at this time next year, then George Paton might not be the one doing the selling in future years because they may look at that and say, okay, it's time for a pretty thorough change of football operations after a disappointing season.
Yeah, things change pretty quickly in the National Football League. And Mace, I compare it to college football where you got recruiting classes.
Yeah.
Like these aren't George Payton's guys yet, but it doesn't take that long to flip a team in the NFL today. So this next year, okay, George, you can only blame John for so long. And not that George is doing that, but certainly there's some in the fan base saying, well, George had to clean up this mess. Well, it's going to be his mess pretty soon.
Yeah, and I think let's look at where you are next year, because it would be next year would be the last year of the 2020 rookie class in terms of their initial contracts, because they're 4-year deals. Everybody else is basically George Payton's guys at that point, even guys that were re-signed, because ultimately George Payton did choose to re-sign Justin Simmons, did choose to re-sign Tim Patrick, did choose to re-sign Cortland Sutton. So at that point, next year, and oh, by the way, if they had wanted to trade one or both of the receivers from the 2020 draft class, KJ Hamler, Jerry Jeudy, they could have, but they chose to hold fast. I think it is fair to say that next year, 2023, that is fully George Payton's team at that point. And so the success or failure of it does fall upon him.
Yeah, it falls upon him. And you mentioned the wide receivers not going anywhere. Something else from the Payton press conference is the interest was there. The Broncos just decided to say no. Does that mean the interest was there, but the offers weren't good enough? Or no matter the offer, they weren't going to trade those wide receivers to a certain point? There's a tipping point for everything.
Well, it's funny. I say this sitting here in Wisconsin, and the generally accepted belief in Wisconsin is that the Packers were sniffing around Jerry Jeudy, but did not meet the price. And so there's a little bit of frustration here in Packerland from where I do this show that the Packers, who are a very conservative organization in how they go about things, they are not as aggressive on trades. I mean, George Payton's actually on the aggressive side of things when it comes to making deals. He likes to deal. He likes to have those phone calls going. Green Bay still very much philosophically is in the vein of the late Ted Thompson in terms of valuing their own guys and then valuing the picks that they have to add to their collection of their own guys rather than looking elsewhere for talent.
Yeah, it's Brian Coos now, but it's Ted Thompson in spirit.
He's a Teddy guy. He is a Teddy guy through and through.
Dude, I was a Teddy guy. Ted Thompson might have been my favorite GM in the league. And what's the resort at the Shrine in Tampa when it was in Tampa?
The Trade Winds.
Trade Winds, yes. I was going to say Blue Winds, but Trade Winds. I remember, like, if you were early enough, and you had to be pretty early, you could get coffee with Ted Thompson before the weigh-in. For those that were allowed to go in the weigh-in, because it's not for everybody, but that Ted Thompson was early riser, grinder, there to do the work. And there were just a few times, Mace, on the All-Star road trip, some of my favorite memories of just being able to talk ball with the likes of Ted Thompson or Ozzie Newsome, two of my favorite.
Yes. And they've forgotten more than most people know. And the other thing, those two, they played in the same era. They came into the league in the mid to late 70s. Ozzie playing for, of course, Cleveland, and Ted Thompson playing for the Houston Oilers. And so what we're seeing, Cecil, is the guys that were a part of the sport as players when you and I were growing up, that they've had these full careers, and then they've completed as executives and coaches, and they've completed them. And sadly, of course, Ted Thompson passed away a couple of years ago. He's no longer with us. Ozzie Newsome is a consultant with the Baltimore Ravens, but is very much involved. Eric DaCosta does have an awful lot of conversations with Ozzie Newsome, and Ozzie is very much still in the inner circle of what they're doing in Baltimore.
Oh, you love it. You love it. You love that old school mentality. And George Payton certainly brings that study habits and that work ethic to the forefront there at the GM position. That to me is like, okay, I'm going to trust in George Payton. There's been people that it's been shaken. And listen, Broncos country is real emotional. I get it. I'm never going to tell someone how to fan. But I will tell you this, and I will emphasize this. If you're doubting George Payton, don't. Give him time. Let him have another draft class and watch him go to work.
Yeah, I actually put a little thing in my piece this morning that if you go by the approximate value, which is calculated by Pro Football Reference at the end of every year, And it's sort of like wins above replacement in baseball for those who are familiar with that stat, to kind of get a year by year value for how important and how proficient every player is. In terms of approximate value of the entire 21 draft class, the Broncos were third in the league. It's pretty good for 1 year for George Payton. And you look at how many starters he found. Pat Surtain, not only a starter, but an all pro level starter. Javonte Williams playing at a high level before he got hurt. Quinn Miners. I think Quinn Miners is actually, when you look at the offensive line, he's the one that I feel like is going to be there on the other side of what could be a pretty profound and thorough rebuild of the O-line as we get into the offseason. And then, of course, Baron Browning is literally part of the reason why you were able to trade Bradley Chubb and justify it is because of Baron Browning. So you've got not only 4 starters, but I think 4 at least very good starters, above average starters from that first draft class. And then even without picking until 64 in 2022, Nick Bonito's shown flashes. Greg Dulcich already looks like a big upgrade at the tight end position. Let's see what he does when he learns how to block better. Damari Mathis, I think, is going to be a keeper at corner. Matt Henningsen from round 6, I think, wouldn't be surprised if he's the third defensive lineman, the guy who's starting when they go in base packages next year. So if you're finding 4 starters a year in the draft of pretty decent quality, that says a lot. And that's, again, I think George Payton is doing a great job. But that being said, if they are sellers at this time next year, fair or not, he's going to have to answer some uncomfortable questions.
Right. Are you hitting singles or doubles or grand slams? And that has exhausted my baseball knowledge, Mace. I apologize. But
well, you know what? There's room for a good singles hitter, all right? But they say every lineup needs some thump. Like if you have a bunch of guys who are singles hitters, that's fine and dandy, but you need somebody who's going to bring some power at some point. You need a balanced lineup. You need to be able to accomplish everything over the course of the 9 guys you've got coming to the plate. And so, as a general manager, you got to hit some home runs. Now, that being said, I think he hit a home run with Pat Surtain. You know,
that's a grand slam.
Yeah, that is a grand slam. But the big swing was Russell Wilson trading for him, and the jury is very much out on that one.
It's very much out on that. We will stay tuned and we will watch that. Appreciate everyone for watching Orange and Blue today. Mm-hmm. What a response it's been from the crowd out there. I'll say this. Draymond Jones, if he wants to, Mace, could be very happy before the bye week is over. If he wants to. I feel that there will be an offer for Draymond Jones real soon. And if he wants to take, and I'm not even going to say hometown deal because I think that's kind of insulting to Draymond. Yeah. But I believe that the Broncos should be motivated to offer him a contract now rather than wait and do a tag and then try to work something out. Now they can, if that's the case, because we're talking about a player who's likely to make $20 million a year. Mm-hmm. So what are your feelings about Draymond Jones perhaps getting a deal before the Broncos play their next game?
It would be great if you could. I mean, it takes 2 to tango. I think the Broncos are willing to give Draymond Jones a deal. The question is, Draymond Jones, where does he stand in terms of what type of contract that he wants? If they're not working on it right now, then something's wrong. Now, I think they are working on it right now. Once things went askew with Bradley Chubb enough to where the Broncos knew, he's probably not going to sign an extension with us. That you weren't on the same page in terms of what you were thinking contractually. It very much became, all right, Draymond Jones is the next guy on the list. If you're not paying Bradley Chubb, you definitely need to pay Draymond Jones. He's the next guy coming up contractually who has special talent. So make it happen. I mean, I do have every bit of confidence behind the scenes that they're working on this, but it does, again, come down to, does Draymond Jones want to stay here? Do the Broncos have the right terms in mind? I would say this, Cecil, though. If they're making progress, the franchise tag comes into play and it's a placeholder. And that is what George Payton did do with Justin Simmons. Remember, he was briefly franchised again in 2021, but it was very much, all right, we're about to get a deal done with him. And of course they did.
Yeah, and as we've seen before in years past, like you get something done now, it prevents you from paying more later.
Right.
But if you're just close enough, you can't really work it now. The franchise tag becomes an
Mhm.
option, especially if you do feel like you are close with Draymond
Mhm.
Jones, and more power to him, man. You're talking about a player that the Broncos find and they pick up that has outperformed his draft position. And Mace, honestly, as much as I love the draft, as much as you love the draft, as soon as they get a couple years in, draft status doesn't really matter.
Right.
Draymond Jones is a player, and he's going to be among the higher paid in the NFL at his position. He deserves it.
Yeah, he deserves it. And you look back at that draft in particular. I mean, for
He was
me,
my
when
number
it
50 player that year.
yeah, at that pick, I had my eye on two guys, Draymond Jones and Terry McLaurin, both Ohio State Buckeyes. As
Mm-hmm.
we've learned, you couldn't have gone wrong with either of them, right?
Right. Get your Buckeye.
Yeah, I get both of them have been arguably the great finds of that third round in the draft that year. So, but yeah, it makes all the sense in the world. I mean, how many interior pass rushers can do what Draymond Jones does in the league? I mean, I'd say probably at that specific skill set, he's top 5 right now today as an interior pass rusher. And oh, by the way, he's pretty good against the run. And oh, by the way, he and DJ Jones have exquisite chemistry together. It's fun to watch the two of them stunt and play off of each other. DJ Jones has gone to another level because of Draymond, and Draymond's gone to another level because of DJ.
It's perfect. It's absolutely perfect. So again, with the people that are curious about George Payton or whatever, it's like he did that. He did that with DJ, and it's flourished. Draymond has been able to flourish now for the Denver Broncos. So more power to him. And as Holy Diver says, yeah, he's a beast. He is out there. And interior pressure, you and I've mentioned it. He's versatile. He's going to have multiple teams after him, no matter your scheme. And interior pressure makes every quarterback look mortal. You can get that guy, your edge are fine. You got edge guys. Your interior guys, you can't. There's no one to replace Draymond.
No doubt. And if you're wondering about the impact of interior pressure, if you remember the 2015 AFC Championship game, Von Miller, DeMarcus Ware had big games off the edge. But the guys who really made that happen were Malik Jackson and Derek Wolfe working in the interior as well and getting Tom Brady off the spot. Because when you get that interior pressure, it's like I said, it's a matter of geometry. It's getting to the quarterback quicker, getting him off the spot quicker. The thing that comes into play now with this generation of mobile quarterbacks is you get them off the spot, and then guys on the back end have to do their job. But almost every quarterback wants to work from the pocket first and go from there. And that's where Draymond and DJ are doing a tremendous job in terms of being disruptive and forcing QBs off the spot from which they want to throw.
Okay, we'll leave the Sean Payton talk out of it today because that
was spicy.
It did.
Well,
it did.
When I put the clip out this morning, I knew it was going to get some play and get people talking, and it did.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and that's what we're here for. Right? I mean, listen, and I'm going to sound like an aloha, Mace, but you're watching Orange and Blue today for information and opinion. We're not going to shy away from things. We're not going to tell you everything's okay. There's plenty of other channels that if you want that, if that's the way that you consume things, we're also not going to be super negative.
Yeah.
Okay. I absolutely refuse to do hot take radio or hot take podcasting or whatever we're calling this. I absolutely refuse to do it. But I also refuse to be a part of something where it's like, you can't say anything bad about the team. We're not saying anything bad. We're just saying like, hey, now you've got options. And we're getting comments in the chat room of like, well, is it offense or defense in the first round? Better be offensive line, right?
Ideally. I mean, unless there's somebody that you absolutely love at a premium spot who falls to you. Like that's the key thing. And you do have to be prepared to adapt. But I would argue that it may well dovetail that way nicely because whether it's left tackle or right tackle, you're talking about a premium position. I think there's going to be quality there. You and I, Cecil, are going to do an awful lot of shows over the next few months in all likelihood where we talk about all the offensive linemen in the draft to within an inch of their life. I mean, this is how it's going to be. Just in the same way that we talked about quarterbacks in previous drafts, we're going to talk about the offensive linemen. Because if the Broncos aren't looking in that direction, they're doing it wrong. But I'll say this. They are. Trust me. They know what's going on. They know what they have to do. They know the line is in need of significant restorative work.
Yep. And my hot take is they need a left tackle. So there you go.
Yeah.
And you'll get a college guy that plays right the first year, and then he'll transition to left because Garrett Bowles' contract will be more malleable at that time. Hell, it's malleable after this year, honestly.
But Garrett Bowles is only a left tackle. I heard you say that this morning on
somebody asked me
break.
that, like, hey, could he play right? I was like, no,
no.
No, that would be bad. That would be really bad. All right, that is a wrap for today. Abbreviated show. We appreciate you all out there for watching every day. Again, the response has been huge to this show, and we love you guys for it. Thank you very much for giving us a piece of your time. He is Andrew Mason at Mace Denver. I am at Cecil Lammey. This is Orange and Blue today, everyone. Be safe, be kind, know that you're appreciated, and as always, stay tuned. And I command that you stay frosty.